There is a fly walking across your kitchen counter right now. It landed on the rim of the sink, then on the butter dish, then on the crust of the bread you left out to cool, and it will be back before you finish reading this, walking, tasting, rubbing its legs together like it owns the place. By Friday, there will be a dozen of them, because a fly never travels alone for long, and a fly is never just one fly. On my kitchen windowsill, there is a glass jar. It cost me $3. Inside, it is warm water, a spoonful of sugar, and one thing out of my pantry that you would never in 100 years guess. And that jar, sitting quiet on the sill in the sun, is going to end the flies in my kitchen for the whole summer without a single strip of sticky paper and without one can of spray. Stay with me. My name is Sarah. The children and the grandchildren all call me Mammi, and so may you, for that is who I am now. I am Amish. I keep house on a farm here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, the same farm where I raised 7 children, and where the flies come thick off the barn and the horses and the manure and the summer heat, the way they do on every farm that ever was. And I have not swatted a fly at my own kitchen table in more years than I care to count. We have no screens on half these old windows. We have no can of spray under the sink. What we have is a jar on the sill. I am going to show you exactly how I make it, exactly what goes in it, and exactly where to set it so it works. And then I am going to tell you the part that ought to make you a little cross, which is that the folks who sell you fly paper and fly spray have known about this jar for 100 years, and they would just as soon you never heard of it, because a $3 jar that you fill with a spoon of sugar does not make anybody rich. Let me start with what most folks get wrong, because if you do not understand this one thing, none of the rest will help you. You are fighting the fly in the wrong place and at the wrong time. When you see a fly land on your counter and you reach for the swatter, you have already lost. That fly has been in your kitchen for hours. It has walked across your food. It has tasted it with its feet, for that is how a fly tastes, through its feet. And if it is a female, she has more than likely already laid her eggs somewhere warm and damp and out of your sight, down in the scrap pail, in the drain, in the wet bottom of the trash under the bag. One fly that you can see means 100 you cannot. The swatter kills the one. It does nothing at all about the 100. You could stand there with a swatter from breakfast until dark, and the next morning there would be just as many, because you were never fighting the flies in the room. You were fighting the flies being born in the pail. Here is the truth of a fly, and once you know it, you will never look at one the same way. A fly does not find your kitchen by luck. She finds it by smell, and her smelling is a wonder, far better than yours or mine. She can catch the scent of something sweet, something ripe, something turning and fermenting from clear across a yard, and she flies straight up the trail to the source. So you cannot win by hiding the food, for the ripening banana in your bowl and the drop of jam by the toaster are singing out to her, whether you like it or not. But here is the door that opens for us. If a fly comes by smell, then you can build her something that smells better than anything you own. A little pool of scent so sweet and so alive that it pulls her off your table and over to the window, built so that she can walk in but never, ever walk out. You do not swat the fly at the table. You draw her to the jar at the window, and you end her there. It is the same wisdom my husband used on the mosquitoes. God rest him. Kill the thing at the doorway before it ever reaches the table. This is what we have always done. My own mother kept a jar like this on every windowsill in the house, from the first warm week of May clear through to the killing frost. One on the kitchen sill, one over the wash basin, one by the pantry door where the scraps went out. The sticky ribbon you unroll out of a little cardboard tube, the kind that curls up black and dreadful and that you are ashamed to have hanging when company comes, was not even invented until my grandmother was a grown woman with children of her own. And when it came to the store, she laughed at it, because we had been doing the same work with a jar and a scrap of paper and a spoon of sugar since before her own grandmother crossed the ocean. The jar is not a clever new idea. It is a very old one that got quietly buried under 100 years of things somebody wanted to sell you. So here is how I make mine, and I want you to do it right along with me, for it truly takes about 5 minutes. You will need 3 things, and every one you likely have already. The first is the jar, a glass jar, and it wants a wide mouth, not a narrow one. A pint canning jar is just right, about $3 new at the hardware store. But you need not even buy it. An old pickle jar washed clean, a jam jar, a mayonnaise jar, any wide clear glass jar in the cupboard does the same work for nothing. Clear glass, so the sun comes through, and a wide mouth, so there is room for what comes next. That is the whole of the $3. Everything else is pennies. The second thing is the bait, and this is where the magic lives. You fill your jar about halfway with warm water. Not hot, just warm from the tap, warm as a baby's bath. Into it you stir a good heaping spoon of plain white sugar until the water goes a little cloudy and the sugar is gone. Then you pour in a splash of apple cider vinegar, a good glug, maybe 2 spoonfuls. That vinegar is not there by accident. To a fly it smells exactly like fruit that is turning, like an orchard in September with the windfalls going soft in the grass. And there is nothing a fly loves better than fruit on the turn. That sour, sweet, cidery smell is a dinner bell rung right in her ear. And now the third thing, the thing nobody ever guesses, the piece that turns a jar of sweet water into something that hunts. You take a pinch, just a pinch, of the same dry yeast I use to raise my bread. You sprinkle it right on top and you do not stir it hard. You let it sit. And here is what happens, and I want you to understand it, for it is the heart of the whole business. Within the hour that yeast wakes up in the warm sugar water and begins to feed. And as a living thing feeds, it breathes. The yeast breathes out a gas, the very same gas you and I breathe out, the same gas that rises off every warm, living creature on the farm, off the cow and the horse and the sleeping dog. And that gas, more than the sugar, more than the vinegar, is the thing a fly's whole body is built to hunt. To a fly, that gas means a warm body. It means a place to lay her eggs. Your quiet little jar on the windowsill has begun to breathe like a living animal, and now the flies come to it from clear across the room, drawn to a heartbeat that is only a spoon of sugar and a pinch of bread yeast. Now, a jar of breathing bait that a fly can land in and buzz right back out of is no better than a saucer of jam. You would only be feeding them. So we build the door, and it costs you nothing but a scrap of paper. Take a square of paper, torn off a brown grocery sack, or a half sheet of newspaper. Roll it into a cone, a funnel, wide at the top and coming down to a little point, and at the very point, leave a hole no bigger than a dried pea. Set that cone point down into the mouth of the jar, so the little hole hangs about an inch above the bait, not touching it. Then fold the wide top down over the rim, snug, or run a bit of tape around it, so there is not one gap for a fly to slip through. Now the only way into all that cidery, sugary sweetness is down through that one pea-sized hole at the point of the cone. And here is why that funnel is the cleverest thing in this whole kitchen. A fly follows the smell down. She comes to the wide top of the cone, walks down the inside, and slips through the little hole to the feast below, easy as anything. She eats her fill. And then, when she wants to leave, she does the one thing every fly that ever lived does without fail. She flies up toward the light, toward the shine of the glass, toward the bright window. She batters against the sides of the jar and the underside of the paper, and never once thinks to go back down into the small, dark hole she came in by. She hasn't the wit for it. A fly simply cannot solve a funnel. That is the whole secret, 200 years old and older, and it works every single time. Where you set the jar matters near as much as what is in it. You want the sunniest windowsill you have got, where the flies already gather and buzz against the glass of an afternoon. For a fly loves the warm, bright window and goes to it on its own. And you want it away from where you sit and eat, for you are drawing the flies to the window and away from the table. Set it on the sill, off to the side. One jar for every window that draws flies, one by the door, one near the scrap crock. Then every 3 or 4 days, when the jar has done its work and you can see plainly what it has caught, you carry it outside to empty it. Outside, mind, not over your kitchen sink. Tip it onto the compost or into a hole in the garden and cover it over. Rinse the jar and build it fresh, warm water, a spoon of sugar, a splash of vinegar, a pinch of yeast, the cone back on top. $3 for the jar the one time, and a spoon of sugar every few days after, all the long summer through. Now let me name the science of it in plain words, because you deserve to know why a thing works and not just be told that it does. The pulling power of the jar is two things braided together. It is the smell of fermentation, the cidery sour of the vinegar and the sugar, which says ripe fruit to a fly. And it is that gas the yeast breathes out. Carbon dioxide is the long name, which says warm, living creature. And here is what may surprise you. It is the very same principle the county men use in the big fly and mosquito traps they hang in the parks and along the marshes. Bait for the smell, and a bit of that same gas for the pull. The only difference is they buy their gas in a heavy steel tank that costs a great deal of money, and I make mine with a spoon of sugar and a pinch of the yeast out of my bread crock. I do not trouble with the long Latin names for any of it. The yeast does not know them either, and it does its work all the same. Now I have to be honest with you, because honest is worth more to me than clever, and my mother raised me to say the hard part out loud. This jar catches the flies already in your house and knocks their numbers down wonderfully, but it is not a miracle, and it is not the whole of the job. If you leave the scrap pail open, if you leave the sweet spill drying on the counter, if you prop the screen door with a brick on a hot afternoon, you will make new flies faster than any jar on earth can catch them. The jar is the trap. Keeping a clean, covered, wiped-down kitchen is the other half, the source work, and you need both together. Cover your scraps, take the trash out before it turns, wipe the sweet away. And keep your jar up on the sill and out of reach of the little ones and the dog, for it is sweet water dressed up to tempt, and no child and no pup should drink it. If it is the little flies you have got, the ones that hang in a cloud over the fruit bowl, this same jar with a smaller hole catches those just as well. But a real trouble, a mess of maggots in the bottom of a can, that you fix at the can with hot soapy water, not with a jar on the sill. So now let me tell you the part that made me want to sit down and record this at all. You think for a moment about who makes money when you cannot keep the flies off your own table. The sticky ribbon folks sell you a fresh roll every summer, that dreadful curling black thing you hide when the preacher comes. The spray folks sell you a can that you breathe in your own kitchen over the very bread your family is going to eat, and then you buy it again come August when it runs dry. The plug-in, the hanging strip, every last one sells you a thing you use up and buy again, world without end. And a glass jar you fill with a spoon of sugar sells nobody 1 red cent. Now I do not believe there was ever a meeting about this. I do not hold with that kind of talk. It is something quieter than a plot, and in its way sadder. It is a room full of good folks who all make their living selling you the cure, and not one of them with any reason at all to mention the jar your great-grandmother kept on her sill. They do not need to gather and agree. They need only stay quiet, and they have stayed quiet for 100 years. I want to lift my eyes up from the jar for a moment, because this is bigger than flies. A home you can keep clean and sweet with your own 2 hands, and $3 is a home that answers to nobody. And that is a kind of freedom the world does not sell, because it cannot make $1 off of it. Flies are not only a nuisance. They walk on filth, on the manure pile, and the worst of what is out there. And then on the bread your children eat, and keeping them off your family's food is one of the oldest and humblest duties in any kitchen. My grandmother used to say a clean sill makes for a clean conscience. I cannot tell you the two are truly joined, but I have kept that jar on my sill the better part of a life and never once regretted it. And there is something in a house kept well by your own hand that money has never been able to buy. So this week, here is what I want you to do. Find a wide-mouthed glass jar, $3 new or free out of your own cupboard. Fill it halfway with warm water. Stir in a heaping spoon of sugar until it clouds, and pour in a splash of apple cider vinegar. Then add a pinch of the very same yeast you would bake bread with, for that is the piece nobody guesses and the piece that does the pulling. Roll a square of paper into a cone with a hole no bigger than a pea at the point. Set it point down in the mouth so it hangs an inch above the bait, and fold the top snug over the rim so there is not one gap. Set the jar on your sunniest windowsill, away from the table, one for every window that draws flies. Carry it outside to empty every few days and build it fresh. $3 the one time, and a spoon of sugar after that, and your kitchen quiet and clean the whole summer long. Tell me in the comments below where you are writing to me from and what your flies are like this year, the big lazy ones that come drifting in off the barn or the little ones hanging over the fruit bowl. I read every last one of these, every one, and I answer. The ones I am able to. And tell me if you set out a jar, for I should dearly love to hear how it goes for you in your own kitchen. The folks in my own community have kept these on the sill their whole lives long and never thought it worth a mention. I am setting it down here for the ones outside of it who were simply never told. Next time, I am going to show you the little tin my mother kept on the pantry shelf that kept the ants from ever once crossing it, all the summer through, which is nothing in the world but one single thing out of the spice cupboard and a thin line drawn along the wood that an ant will come up to and turn and walk away from every time. You would never guess which spice it is, and it costs you less than $1. Until then, keep your table clean, keep your jar on the sill, and remember, the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.